Hi and welcome. I'm Midnight Truth, and it's so nice to have you here tonight, wherever you are right now. Whether you're in bed, lie on the couch, or just looking for a quiet moment, I want you to know this time is for you. Take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, feel the weight of the day start to fade. Let your mind settle, let your body relax, and let yourself simply be. There's no rush, no pressure, just this calm, quiet moment. If you like, you can close your eyes and imagine yourself in a peaceful place. Maybe it's a cozy room with soft, warm lighting. Or maybe it's under a starry sky, with a gentle breeze brushing against you. Wherever you feel safe and calm, let yourself drift there. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time is it there? Tonight's story is gentle and soothing, perfect to carry you into a deep, restful sleep. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. I pulled into the driveway just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a bruised purple. The moving truck rattled behind me, stuffed to the brim with boxes I hadn't bothered to label. My divorce was still fresh, ink barely dry on the papers, and I'd taken the first job offer that came my way. A small marketing gig in a nowhere town called Harrow's End. The pay wasn't great, but it was a clean break, a chance to start over. The house came with the deal, a perk from the company, since no one else wanted to rent it. I didn't ask why. I figured cheap rent was cheap rent. The place loomed ahead of me, a two-story relic with peeling gray paint and a sagging porch. It looked like it hadn't been touched since the 1950s. Maybe earlier. The windows were tall and narrow, like eyes watching me fumble with the keys. The real estate lady had called it charming over phone, but standing there, I'd have gone with tired. Still, it was mine for now, creaks and all. I grabbed a box from the truck, kitchen stuff, I think, and hauled it inside. The front door groaned as I pushed it open, and a stale, musty smell hit me, like old books and damp wood. The floors creaked under my sneakers, loud enough to make me wince. I flipped on the light switch by the door, and a single bulb flickered to life overhead, casting long shadows across the entryway. The walls were covered in faded floral wallpaper, curling at the edges. It wasn't cozy, but it'd do. I spent the next couple of hours unloading boxes, dragging them into the living room, kitchen, and upstairs bedroom. The stairs squeaked with every step, and I made a mental note to watch my footing. The bedroom was small, with a slanted ceiling and a window that rattled when the wind picked up. I dropped my mattress on the floor. No time to set up the bed frame, and called a night. The movers weren't coming until tomorrow with the bigger stuff, so I'd be roughing it for now. Lying there, staring at the cracked ceiling, I listened to the house settle. It was louder than I expected, little pops and groans, like it was stretching its bones. A faint tapping came from the walls, probably pipes or something. I rolled over, pulling the blanket tighter. Old houses make noise, I told myself. It's normal. The next morning, I brewed coffee with the one pot I'd unpacked and started sorting through the chaos. The kitchen had a rusty sink and cabinets that stuck when I tried to open them. I found a weird smell coming from the pantry, sharp and sour like spoiled milk, but there was nothing inside except a few dusty shelves. I shrugged it off. Maybe a mouse had died in the walls years ago. Around noon, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find a woman standing on the porch, maybe 50, with graying hair pulled into a tight bun. She held a pie tin in her hands, the kind you see in movies about small towns. "Hi there," she said, smiling too wide. "I'm Ellen, from next door. Saw you moving in yesterday, and thought I'd welcome you." "Oh, thanks." I took the pie, apple from the smell, and stepped aside. "I'm Jamie, just getting settled." She peered past me into the house, her eyes lingering on the shadowy corners. "It's been a while since anyone lived here. Hope you're handy with a wrench. Place has a mind of its own." I laughed, assuming she meant the creaks and leaks. "Yeah, it's got character, that's for sure. I'll manage." Ellen's smile faltered, just for a second. "Well, you let me know if you need anything. Folks around here keep to themselves, mostly, but I'm close by." She hesitated, then added, "You know about this place, right? The stories." I raised an eyebrow. Stories. She waved a hand like she regretted saying it. Oh, just gossip. Previous tenants, you know. One of M ran out screaming one night. Said the house was cursed or some nonsense. Probably drank too much. Small towns love a good tale. That's colorful, I said, forcing a grin. Guess I'll have to watch out for ghosts. She didn't laugh. Just keep the lights on, she said, then turned and shuffled back to her house across the yard. I watched her go, pie still warm in my hands, and felt a little chill I couldn't explain. The rest of the day was uneventful. I unpacked more boxes, set up a rickety table in the kitchen, and figured out the ancient thermostat. The mover showed up late afternoon with my couch and dresser, grumbling about the narrow stairs. By nightfall, I had something resembling a home. I ate a slice of Ellen's pie, pretty good actually, and scrolled on my phone, trying to ignore how quiet it was. Too quiet, maybe. No traffic, no neighbors yelling, just the house, creaking and sigh around me. That night, I climbed into bed, properly set up this time, and turned off the lamp. The darkness swallowed the room, thick and heavy. I lay there, eyes adjusting to the faint glow from the window, when I heard it, a slow, deliberate creak from a hallway, like a footstep on the old boards. I held my breath, waiting. Nothing, just the house settling, I told myself again. But then it came again, creak, pause, creak, moving closer. I sat up, heart thudding. Hello, I called out, feeling stupid the second I did. No answer, of course. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and swung it toward the door. The beam cut through the shadows, showing nothing but peeling paint and dust. The sound stopped. I waited, ears straining, but it was quiet again. Too quiet. I laughed at myself, a shaky little sound. Old houses, right? I lay back down, but sleep didn't come easy. Every groan of the floor, every tap in the walls, made me twitch. By morning, I was bleary-eyed and jumpy, chalking it up to first night jitters. I had work tomorrow, my first day at the new job, and I needed to pull it together. The day went fine, all things considered. The office was small, the people polite but distant. I spent it setting up my desk and nodding through introductions. When I got home, the house felt less intimidating in the daylight. I cooked a quick dinner, pasta from a box, and decided to explore a little. The downstairs was basic. Living room, kitchen, a tiny bathroom with a clawfoot tub. Upstairs had my bedroom, a spare room I'd use as an office, and a locked door at the end of the hall. I jiggled the knob, but wouldn't budge. No key in sight. Probably a closet, I figured. I'd ask the landlord about it later. That night, I heard the footsteps again. Heavier this time, like boots stomping across the floor. They started downstairs near the kitchen and moved up the stairs. Creak, creak, creak. Slow and steady. I bolted upright, phone in hand, and flicked on the lamp. The light didn't help much. The shadows seemed to twist in the corners. The steps stopped right outside my door. I stared at the knob, waiting for it to turn, but it didn't. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Is someone there? I whispered, barely audible. No response. I forced myself out of bed, legs shaky, and cracked the door open. The hallway was empty, dark, and cold, colder than it should have been. I stepped out, shining my phone's light around. Nothing, just a locked door at the end, staring back at me like it knew something I didn't. I went back to bed, locking my door this time, and told myself it was the wind or the pipes or anything but what it sounded like. But as I drifted off, I swore I heard a low, raspy whisper from the other side of the wall. Too faint to make out, but close. Too close. The house wasn't just old. It was awake. I woke up the next morning with a crick in my neck and a vague memory of that whisper lingering in my head. Sunlight streamed through the window, weak and gray, but enough to make the house feel less like a tomb. I rubbed my eyes and checked the time, 6:47 a.m. My second day at the job started in an hour, and I needed coffee if I was going to survive it. Downstairs, the kitchen was chilly, even with the heat on. I brewed a pot, watching steam curl up in the machine, and tried to shake off the unease from last night. Footsteps, whispers. It was just my imagination running wild. New place, new noises. I'd get used to it. The coffee smelled strong and bitter, cutting through that sour pantry stench I still couldn't pin down. I made a note to buy some air freshener later. Work was a blur of emails and awkward small talk. My boss, a guy named Carl with a permanent frown, gave me a stack of client files to review. The office was quiet, just a hum of computers and the occasional call from a cubicle. I kept my head down, grateful for distraction. By the time I clocked out at 5, the sky was already darkening, a cold wind rattling the bare trees outside. Back at the house, I microwaved leftovers and ate at the wobbly kitchen table. The silence was starting to get to me. No TV yet, no radio, just the creak of the floorboards every time I shifted my weight. I scrolled through my phone, half-heartedly swiping through job listings, wondering if I'd made a mistake moving here. Harrow's End wasn't exactly a bustling metropolis. The nearest grocery store was a 20-minute drive, and the town felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. After dinner, I decided to tackle more unpacking. The living room was still a mess of boxes, so I started there, pulling out books and stacking them on a shelf I'd hauled up from the truck. The shelf wobbled, but it held. I found an old lamp too, brass with a cracked shade, and plugged it in. It flickered once, then steadied, throwing a warm glow across the room. Better than the harsh overhead light. At least, that's when I noticed a cold spot. I was kneeling by a box of DVDs when the air around me turned icy, like I'd opened a freezer door. I shivered, rubbing my arms, and glanced around. The heat was on. I could hear the faint rumble of the furnace, but this chill felt different, sharp and sudden. I stood up, and it was gone, the air normal again. Weird, but I brushed it off. Drafty old houses, right? Upstairs, I kept going, dragging clothes into the bedroom closet. The hangers clacked against the metal rod, loud in the quiet. I was folding a sweater when I heard it. A faint thud from the spare room next door, like something heavy hitting the floor. I froze, listening. Nothing followed. Just the usual creaks and pops. I stepped into the hall, peering through the spare room's open door. Empty, except for a box I'd left there yesterday. The floor looked fine, no sign of anything falling. I laughed a little too loud. "Get a grip, Jamie," I muttered, heading back to the bedroom. But the thud stuck with me, nagging at the back of my mind. That night, I locked the bedroom door again and climbed into bed. The lamp cast long shadows on the walls, and I watched them shift as the wind rattled the window. Sleep came slow, my brain replaying Ellen's words about the house being cursed. Ridiculous. I wasn't some superstitious kid. Still, when I finally drifted off, I dreamed of footsteps pacing outside my door, steady and endless. The next few days fell into a routine. Wake up, coffee work, home, unpack. The job was fine, dull, but fine, and I started to feel like I could handle this fresh start. The house, though, it kept throwing curveballs. The cold spots popped up randomly, always brief but intense. One night, I smelled smoke in the living room, faint like a dying campfire, but there was no source, no haze. I checked the fireplace, blocked up, unused, and every outlet. Nothing. The smell faded after a few minutes, leaving me standing there, sniffing the air like an idiot. Then there were the noises. The footsteps came back, always at night, always starting downstairs and climbing the stairs. They'd stop outside my door, and I'd lie there, heart pounding, waiting for something to happen. It never did. I'd check the hall, find it empty and go back to bed, telling myself I was losing it. The tapping in the walls got worse too, sharp, rhythmic, like someone knocking from the inside. I banged on the wall once, half expecting an answer, but it just stopped. For a while. Anyway, Friday night, I met Ellen again. I was taking out the trash when she waved from her porch, cigarette glowing in the dusk. I wandered over, figuring I could use some human contact. "Settling in okay?" she asked, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Yeah, mostly." I hesitated, then added, "It's noisier than I thought. Creaks and stuff." She nodded like she'd heard it before. "Old places like that, they talk a lot. You get used to it." "Maybe." I scratched my neck, debating whether to mention the footsteps. "You ever hear anything weird over there?" Her eyes flicked to the house, then back to me, Weird how? Like footsteps. At night. She took a long drag, staring at me. Folks used to say they heard things. The last guy before you, he was a mess. Said he heard boots stomping around. Swore something was watching him. Took off after a month. I swallowed, watching him. Ellen shrugged. That's what he said, babbling about shadows and eyes. I figured he was on something. She tapped Ash onto the porch. You're not hearing that, are you? No, I lied, forcing a smile. Just the usual creaks. She didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. Well, holler if you need me. I'm up late most nights. I thanked her and headed back, the conversation replaying in my head. Shadows and eyes. Great, just what I needed to hear. That weekend, I decided to explore the house more. I'd been avoiding it, sticking to the rooms I used, but curiosity got the better of me. The basement door was in the kitchen, half hidden behind the pantry. I tugged it open and a wave of damp, earthy air hit me. The stairs were wooden, warped, and steep, disappearing into pitch black. I grabbed a flashlight from a drawer and started down. The beam bounced off concrete walls, slick with moisture. The basement was small, cluttered with junk, rusty tools, a broken chair, a cracked mirror leaning against a shelf. Cobwebs hung in the corners, and the air felt thick, hard to breathe. I poked around, shining the light into shadows, when I spotted something odd. A small door, maybe 3 feet high, set into the far wall. It was painted the same gray as the concrete, blending in unless you looked close. I crouched, running the light over it. No knob, just a rusty latch. I tugged, but wouldn't budge, locked or stuck. I pressed my ear to it, half joking to myself about hearing something creepy. All I got was silence, heavy and deep, like the space behind it went on forever. A chill crawled at my spine, and I backed off, deciding I didn't even know what was in there. Not today. Upstairs felt warmer, safer. I locked the basement door and shoved a chair against it, just in case. The rest of the day, I kept busy. Groceries, laundry, anything stayed distracted. But that night, the house wouldn't let me forget. I was in bed, scrolling my phone, when the footsteps started again. Louder this time, deliberate, stomping up the stairs. Creak, creak, creak. I dropped the phone, breath catching, and stared at the door. They stopped right outside, same as always, but then thump. Something heavy hit the floor, like a boot kicking the baseboard. I yanked the blanket up, eyes locked on the knob. It didn't turn, but I heard it, a low, guttural sound, like someone exhaling right against the wood. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The sound faded, and the air turned cold, so cold my teeth chattered. I fumbled for the lamp, nearly knocking it over, and light flooded the room. The chill lifted, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I checked the hall, empty of course, and stood there listening to the house groan around me. Sleep was a lost cause. I sat up all night, lamp on, waiting for dawn. The footsteps didn't come back, but the feeling stayed, like something was pacing just out of sight, biding its time. By morning, I was a wreck. I needed answers. Ellen's story, the locked doors and noises, it was too much to shrug off. This house had a past, and I was starting to think it wasn't done telling it. Morning hit me like a truck. My eyes were gritty, my head pounding from no sleep, but I dragged myself out of bed anyway. The lamp was still on, buzzing faintly, and the room felt too small, like the walls had inched closer overnight. I stumbled downstairs, the floorboards creaking under me, and made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I needed to figure this out, whatever this was, before I lost my mind. The kitchen was dim, the sky outside heavy with clouds. I sat at the table, sipping coffee, and replayed last night. The footsteps, the thump, that awful exhaling sound. It wasn't just the house settling anymore. I'd lived in old places before, apartments with leaky faucets, cabins with drafty windows, but nothing like this. This felt alive, deliberate, like it was testing me. I grabbed my phone and started searching. Harrow's End Haunted House got me nothing useful. Just tourist traps an hour away and some ghost hunting blog with blurry photos. I tried History of Harrow's End, hoping for something local. A few hits popped up, a town website bragging about its quaint charm, an article on a mill that shut down in the 70s, and a forum post titled, Weird Stuff in Harrow's End. I clicked that one. The post was short. Some guy ranting about flickering streetlights and a dog that wouldn't stop barking at an empty lot. A reply mentioned the old house on Maple Street. My street. Used to belong to a nutcase who thought he could talk to the dead. It said, tenants never stay long. Heard one lady saw faces in windows. The thread died there, no details, but it was enough to make my stomach twist. Faces in the windows. I glanced at the tall, narrow panes behind me. Nothing but gray skies stare back. Ellen's words came back. Previous tenants' curses, shadows. I needed more than rumors. I finished my coffee, threw on a jacket, and headed next door. She was on her porch again, watering a sad-looking plant, cigarette dangling from her lips. Hey, Ellen. I called, jogging up her steps. Got a minute? She squinted at me, setting the watering can down. You look like hell. Rough night. Yeah, you could say that. I shoved my hands in my pockets, trying to sound casual. I was wondering about the house. You mentioned stories. Anything specific you remember? She took a drag, eyeing me. You're hearing it, aren't you? The stomping. I nodded. No point in lying. Every night. Starts downstairs, comes up. Last night I don't know, it felt closer. She exhaled smoke through her nose, slow and deliberate. Told you it got a mind of its own. Been that way since I moved here, 20 years back. First tenant I saw was a young couple. Nice folks. Fixed the place up. They lasted 3 months. Said they heard voices, saw things move. Husband swore something grabbed his arm in the basement. The basement? I thought of that little locked door, the heavy silence behind it. Yep, after them, it was a single guy, then an older lady. Same deal, noises, cold spots. The guy I told you about, the one who ran off screaming, he was the worst. Kept yelling about eyes in the dark. Sheriff found him on the road, half frozen, babbling. Never came back for his stuff. I shifted, unease crawling up my spine. What about before that? Who owned it first? Ellen flicked Ash onto the porch. Fella named Amos Crane. Built the place, must have been 1890s. Lived alone, no family. Folks said he was odd. Kept to himself. Didn't talk much. Rumors went around he was into weird stuff, like seances, rituals. Died in the house, late 1920s. Heart attack, they say, but no one found him for weeks. Stunk up the whole street. Rituals. My voice sounded thin, even to me. She shrugged. That's what they said. Old-timers claimed he was trying to reach the other side. Whatever that means. Probably just lonely, making up stories. But after he died, the house sat empty a long time. People didn't want it. I swallowed hard. And now I've got it. Ellen gave me a look, half pity, half warning. You asked, if it's too much, there's a motel in town. Cheap rates. I'm not running, I said, more to convince myself. Thanks, though. She nodded, like she'd expected that, and went back to her plant. I headed home, her words buzzing in my head. Amos Crane. Seances. Eyes in the dark. It sounded like a bad movie, but the footsteps weren't fiction. I needed proof. Something concrete. Back inside, I tore through the house, looking for anything the last tenants might have left. The living room was bare, just my stuff. The kitchen had nothing but dust and that sour smell. Upstairs, I checked the spare room. Empty except for my box. Then I stopped at the locked door in the hall. I'd ignored it before, but now it felt like a challenge. I grabbed a screwdriver from my toolbox and went to work on the hinges. The screws were rusted, stubborn, but I got them out after some cursing. The door popped free, hinges squeaking, and I pulled it aside. Behind it was a narrow staircase, steep and dark, leading up an attic. I shone my phone's flashlight up there, the beam catching dust motes and cobwebs. The air smelled old, like mildew and something sharper, metal, maybe. I hesitated, Ellen's basement story fresh in my mind, but I'd come this far. The stairs groaned under me, louder than the rest of the house. At the top, I stepped into a small, low-ceilinged room. The flashlight swept over bare boards, a cracked window letting in a sliver of gray light, and a pile of junk in the corner. Boxes, a broken chair, a rusted lamp. I moved closer, kicking up dust, and saw something sticking out of a box, a leather-bound book, edges worn and stained. I picked it up, heart thudding. The cover was blank, no title, just cracked leather. I open it, and the page is crinkled, yellowed handwritten, ink faded but legible. The first line stopped me cold. Asterisk, October 12th, 1923. The voices are louder tonight. They know I'm close. Asterisk, Amos Crane's journal. It had to be. I flipped through, scanning entries. Most were short, dated over months. Asterisk, the candles burn faster now. Something moved in the cellar. I saw it in the mirror, a shape, watching. Asterisk, the handwriting got shakier as it went on. The words more frantic. One page had a sketch. Crude, jagged lines forming a circle with symbols I didn't recognize, and in the middle, an eye. Underneath, he'd scrawled, asterisk, the door is open. I cannot close it. Asterisk. I snapped the book shut, dust puffing into the air. My hands were clammy, my breath short. This wasn't just a lonely old man's ramblings. It felt real, too real. I stuffed the journal in my jacket and hurried downstairs, locking the attic door back in place with trembling fingers. I didn't know what door he meant, but I wasn't ready to find out. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, lamp on, journal in my lap, reading by the flickering light. Amos wrote about rituals, candles, chants, blood smeared on the floor. He thought he could talk to the dead, bring them back. But the later entries turned dark. Asterisk, they won't leave. I hear them in the walls. It's not what I wanted. Asterisk, the last one, dated January 1927, just said, asterisk, I'm sorry. Asterisk. I closed it, stomach churning. The house was quiet. Too quiet, like it was listening. Then, right on cue, the footsteps started. Heavy, slow, thudding across the kitchen floor. Creak, creak, creak up the stairs. I gripped the journal, eyes on the doorway. They stopped in the hall, and I waited, breath held for the thump. It didn't come. Instead, a shadow flickered across the wall, tall, jagged, like a man standing just out of sight. I blinked, and it was gone. The lamp buzzed, steady. My heart hammered, so loud I could hear it. I checked the hall, empty, cold, silent. But the air felt wrong, thick, like something had been there. I locked myself in the bedroom, journal still clutched tight, and sat on the bed, staring at the door. The house wasn't just old. It wasn't just noisy. Whatever Amos Crane had done here, whatever door he'd opened, it hadn't closed when he died. And now I was stuck with it. Sleep didn't come. The footsteps didn't either, but the cold spots did, sharp bursts of icy air brushing my neck, my arms. Once, I swore I heard that whisper again, raspy and close, saying something I couldn't catch. By dawn, I was a mess, but one thing was clear, I had no more. If Amos left a curse, maybe he left a way to end it too. I just hoped I'd find it before whatever was here found me first. I didn't go to work that day. I called in sick, voice hoarse from no sleep, and Carl grumbled but let it slide. The journal sat on the kitchen table, its leather cover staring up at me like it had a pulse. I couldn't stop thinking about Amos Crane, his rituals, his door, the way his words turned from curious to terrified. I needed to understand what he'd done, what I was dealing with. Ignoring it wasn't an option anymore. The house was quiet that morning, sunlight filtering through the cloudy windows. It felt almost normal, like last night's shadow was a trick of my tired brain. Almost. The cold spots lingered, popping up when I least expected. A brush of ice on my elbow while I poured coffee, a shiver down my back as I paced the living room. I kept the lamp on, even in daylight. It made me feel marginally less exposed. I started with the journal again, flipping back to the beginning. Amos's early entries were calm, methodical. October 1923. Asterisk. The books arrived today, 3 volumes from a collector in Boston. They speak of thresholds, of speaking beyond the veil. I will begin with Salt and Flame. Asterisk a week later. Asterisk, the circle holds. The air hums when I chant. I feel them listening. Asterisk, he sounded excited, like a scientist on the edge of a breakthrough. I couldn't tell if he was crazy or just obsessed. By December, things shifted. Asterisk, the cellar is the key. The walls are thin, thinner than up here. I heard a knock tonight, faint but clear. It knows my name. Asterisk, the cellar. I glanced at the basement door, still blocked by the chair I'd shoved against it. My skin prickled. I kept reading. January 1924, asterisk. I saw it, a shape in the dark, tall and bent. It stood at the edge of the circle, watching. The candles went out, and I heard breathing. I must strengthen the wards. Asterisk, his sketches got worse. More circles, jagged symbols that I staring from the page. He wrote about blood next. A few drops mixed with salt, smeared on the floor to bind the threshold. I winced, imagining him down there, alone, cutting his hand in the flickering light. The later entries were a mess, ink smudged like he'd written in a hurry. Asterisk, they're angry. I asked too much, took too much. The house shakes at night, footsteps, voices. I can't sleep. Asterisk, June 1926. Asterisk, it's in the walls now. I hear it scratching, whisper my name. The mirror shows more than my face. Asterisk, I stopped, my coffee going cold. The mirror. I hadn't looked at the cracked one in the basement. But now I wondered what he'd seen. The last page, January 1927, was barely readable. Asterisk, I'm sorry. The door won't close. It's here, always here. I can't. Asterisk had cut off mid-sentence, a shaky line trailing off the page. That was it. No answers, just fear. I closed the book, my hands sweaty. Amos had opened something, a threshold, a door, and it sounded like it swallowed him whole. I couldn't sit still. I grabbed a notebook from my office stuff and started jotting down what I knew. Footsteps, cold spots, whispers, the shadow last night. Ellen's stories matched Amos's. Tenants hearing things, seeing things running. Whatever he'd called up hadn't left when he died. It was still here, pacing the house, watching me. The cellar kept tugging at my thoughts. If that's where he'd done his rituals, maybe there'd be something left, some clue to shut this down. I didn't want to go down there, not after Ellen's basement grab story, but I couldn't keep jumping at shadows either. I needed control. I moved the chair, unlocked the basement door, and grabbed my flashlight. The stairs creaked louder than before, like they were warning me off. The air hit me again, damp, earthy, with that faint metallic tang. I swept the light around, shadows dancing over the junk. The little door was still there, latched shut, blending into the wall. I ignored it for now, focusing on the open space. The concrete floor was stained, dark patches spreading like spilled ink. I crouched, running the light over them. They could have been oil or water, but the journal's blood talk made me think worse. Near the center, I found scratches, faint, uneven lines carved into concrete, forming a rough circle. Inside it, more marks, too worn to read. Symbols, maybe. My stomach twisted. This was it. Amos's ritual spot. I stood, the air growing colder, heavier. The flashlight flickered just once, and I tapped it against my palm. "Don't you dare," I muttered. It steadied, but the chill didn't lift. I turned, checking the walls, and froze. There, above the little door, were more scratches. Words this time, jagged and deep. Asterisk, ITCs. Asterisk. My breath caught. The letters were uneven, like someone had clawed them in a panic. Amos? Another tenant? I stepped closer, heart pounding, and the flashlight caught something else. Faint, smeared streaks below the words. Rust-colored. Blood. Maybe dried long ago. I backed up, the beam shaking in my hand. The air felt alive now, pressing against me, and I swore I heard a faint scratch from behind that little door. I bolted upstairs, slamming the basement door and shoving the chair back. My chest heaved, coffee threatening to come up. It sees. What the hell did that mean? The shadow last night, the eyes Ellen's tenant rambled about. It was starting to fit, and I didn't like the picture. I spent the afternoon pacing, journal open, trying to piece it together. Amos had wanted to talk to the dead, opened some kind of door in the cellar, and lost control. Whatever came through was still here. Footsteps, whispers, cold. The shadow was new, though, and that scared me most. It felt personal, like it knew I was digging. By evening, I was frayed, jumping at every creak. I heated soup, hands shaky, and ate on the couch, lamp blazing. The house stayed quiet, but it was a heavy quiet, like it was holding its breath. I kept the journal close, flipping through it again, looking for a way out. Amos hadn't left one, just regret and panic. I'd have to figure out myself. Night fell fast, the windows turning black. I locked the bedroom door, propped a chair on the knob, and sat on the bed, flashlight on the nightstand. I didn't want to sleep, but my body was crashing, eyelids drooping. I fought it, reading random pages, until the footsteps started. They were louder tonight, booming through the kitchen, shaking the floor. Creak, creak, creak up the stairs, faster than before. I gripped the flashlight, beam aimed at the door. They stopped outside, and the air turned frigid, my breath puffing white. The knob rattled, once, twice, hard enough to make the chair jump. I scrambled back, pressing against the headboard. "Leave me alone." I yelled, voice cracking. The rattling stopped, but the cold didn't. Then came the sound, slow, deliberate scratches on the door, like nails dragging down wood. I shone the light, watching the chair tremble, and saw it. Thin, dark lines forming under the beam. More scratches, spelling out you see in jagged, uneven strokes. I dropped the flashlight, the room spinning. The scratches kept going, scritch, 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 carving deeper. The lamp flickered, dimming, and a shadow loomed on the wall, tall, bent, just like Amos wrote. It stretched across the room, arms too long, head tilted, and I felt it watching me, heavy and unblinking. I grabbed the flashlight, swinging it back, but the shadow was gone. The lamp steadied, the scratches stopped, and the air warmed, just enough to stop my teeth chattering. The door was still locked, chair in place, but those words stared back at me. Asterisk, you see. Asterisk fresh, raw, like they'd always been there. I didn't sleep. I sat there, light on, journal clutched to my chest, until dawn broke. The house went quiet again, pretending to be normal, but I wasn't fooled. It wasn't just in the walls or the cellar anymore. It was in my room, inches away, and it knew I knew. Morning light didn't fix it. I stared at the door, at those scratched words, and felt a dread I couldn't shake. Amos had opened something, and now it was awake, really awake. I had the journal, the cellar, the scratches. I had to end this, whatever it took, before I decided I'd seen too much. I couldn't stay in that room. Dawn crept to the window, pale and weak, but it didn't erase the scratches on the door. Asterisk, you see. Asterisk, the words glared at me, raw and uneven, like a taunt carved by something that didn't need hands. I grabbed my jacket, the journal, and my keys, and got out of there. The house felt too small, too alive, and I needed air, needed to think. Outside, the street was quiet, just Ellen's house across the yard, and a few bare trees rattling in the wind. I climbed into my car, hands shaking as I started the engine. The clock read 6:12 a.m., too early for work. Too late to pretend this was normal. I drove anyway, no plan, just away from that door and that shadow. Harrow's End was a ghost town at this hour. Empty streets, closed shops, a diner with a flickering open sign. I pulled into the lot, grabbed the journal, and went inside. The place smelled of grease and burnt coffee. A bell jingling as I pushed the door. A waitress, maybe 40, with tired eyes and a name tag reading Doris, nodded me to a booth. I slid in, setting the journal on the table, and ordered coffee black. "You okay, hon?" Doris asked, pouring it slow. "Look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a laugh, dry and brittle. "Something like that. Bad night." She raised an eyebrow but didn't push, just left me with a mug. I sipped. The heat grounded me a little, and opened the journal. The words blurred together. Amos's chants, his blood, that damn door. Asterisk, ITCs. You see. Asterisk, the scratches tied it together, like it was talking back. I needed more than his ramblings. I needed someone who knew the town, knew the house before it became this. Ellen was my first thought, but she'd already given me the basics. Amos, the tenants, the rumors. I flipped through my phone, searching Harrow's End history again, digging deeper. A library popped up 10 minutes away, open at 9. Small towns like this. Libraries kept the old stuff, newspapers, records, gossip turned into fact. If Amos Crane left a mark, it'd be there. I killed time at the diner, nursing coffee and picking at a plate of eggs I didn't want. The journal stayed open, its weight heavier than it should have been. Doris refilled my mug twice, eyeing me like she wanted to ask, but didn't. By 8:45, I paid and headed out. The sky still gray, the air sharp with cold. The library was a squat brick building, windows fogged with age. Inside, it smelled like dust and paper, shelves packed tight with books no one read anymore. A librarian, older, glasses perched on her nose, looked up from the desk. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm looking for old town records, maybe newspapers, anything from the 1920s. She pointed me to a back corner. No questions, just a vague microfilms over there. I found the machine, a clunky relic, and a box of film reels labeled by year. I grabbed 1927, Amos's last entry, and threaded it up, the screen flickering to life. The headlines were mundane at first. Crop prices, a new school, some guy's cow getting loose. Then, February 1927, asterisk, local man found dead in home. Asterisk, Amos Crane, 58, discovered in his house on Maple Street after neighbors reported a smell. Heart attack, the coroner said, but the article hinted at more. Asterisk, Crane was known for peculiar habits, often seen carrying books and candles into his cellar. Townsfolk avoided the reclusive man, claiming his home felt wrong. Asterisk, no mention of rituals, just small town suspicion. Another piece, a week later, said the house sat empty, no buyers, no family to claim it. I scrolled back, hunting for anything before his death. October 1923, around his first journal entry, had a blurb, asterisk, Amos Crane purchases occult text from estate sale. Asterisk, it was buried in a gossip column, calling him eccentric and deluded. That was it. Breadcrumbs, not answers. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. The library was silent, but I felt watched, like the house had followed me here. I thanked the librarian and left journal under my arm. The air outside hit me hard, colder now, and I drove back to Ellen's. She was on her porch, smoking as usual, and waved me over. "Thought you'd be at work," she said, squinting through the smoke. Took the day off. I climbed the steps, hesitating. I found something, Amos Crane's journal, in the attic. Her cigarette paused midair. "You're kidding." "Nope." Talks about rituals, a door he opened, something about the cellar. I pulled it out, showing her the cover. "Last night it got bad. Footsteps, scratches on my door. It wrote, you see." Ellen's face tightened, lips pressing thin. "Jesus, Jamie, you shouldn't be messing with that." "I'm not messing. It's messing with me." I flipped to the eye sketch, holding it up. "He drew this. Said it's in the house. Watching. You ever hear anything like that?" She stared at the page, then flicked her cigarette away. "Not that, no. But the old folks, my grand generation, they didn't like Crane. Said he wasn't just odd, he was dangerous. Talked about shadows moving where they shouldn't, noises from that house at night. After he died, kids dared each other to sneak in. One came back crying, said he saw eyes in the dark. No one believed him, but what?" She shrugged. "The house never felt right. Still doesn't." I nodded, pocketing the journal. I saw scratches in the basement too. ITCs. Same handwriting as the door. "It's not just old stories, Ellen. It's real." She didn't argue, just lit another cigarette. "You're stubborn, I'll give you that. What are you going to do? Find a way to stop it." Amos started it. Maybe he left something to finish it. "Good luck," she said, voice flat. "Don't expect it to play nice." I left her there, smoke curling behind me, and headed home. The house looked the same, peeling paint, narrow windows, but it felt heavier, like it knew I'd been talking about it. Inside, the air was cold, the sour smell stronger. I checked the bedroom door. Asterisk. You see, asterisk still there, stark against the wood. I traced the letters with my finger, rough and deep. No denying it now. I spent the day searching the house, journal in hand. The living room had nothing, just my stuff, no hidden clues. The kitchen was bare, the pantry stench making my eyes water. I checked the basement again, flashlight steady, avoiding that little door. The circle was still there, the scratches above it unchanged. I ran my hand over ITCs, the concrete cold and gritty. No new messages, no hints. Back upstairs, I sat with a journal, rereading every line. Amos mentioned wards, salt, symbols, blood, to keep it contained. Maybe I could reverse it, seal whatever he'd opened. I didn't have occult books or candles, but I had salt in the kitchen, worth a shot. Night came too fast. I locked the bedroom door, chair in place, and poured salt along the threshold, feeling ridiculous but desperate. I kept the lamp on, flashlight ready, and waited. The house creaked, louder than usual, like it was flexing. Then the footsteps hit, booming, furious, shaking the walls. Creak, creak, creak up the stairs faster, heavier. They stopped outside, and the door rattled hard, the chair skidding an inch. I grabbed the flashlight, beam on the door. The salt scattered, kicked by some unseen force, and the scratches started scritch, 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 carving new lines. I watched frozen as too late form under asterisk UC. Asterisk the air turned arctic, my breath fogging and the lamp dimmed, flickering wild. Then it came, the shadow. It stretched across the wall, taller this time, arms dangling, head cocked like it was studying me. I swung the flashlight, but it didn't move, just loomed solid and black, edges rippling. A low rasp filled the room. Not words, just a guttural hiss, close enough to feel on my neck. The bed creaked, sinking slightly, like something heavy sat the edge. I bolted, slamming into the door, fumbling the lock. The chair flew aside, and I ran. Down the hall, stairs tripping under me, out the front door into the night. The cold bit my lungs, but I didn't stop, sprinting to Ellen's porch. I pounded her door, flashlight still clenched, until she opened it, eyes wide. Jamie, what? It's in there. I gasped, pointing back. It sat on my bed. I felt it. She pulled me inside, locking the door, and I collapsed on her couch, shaking. The journal was still in my jacket, crumpled but there. Ellen didn't say much, just handed me a glass of water and watched me gulp it down. You can't go back tonight, she said finally. Stay here. I nodded, too rattled to argue. Her house was warm, quiet, normal, but as I sat there, catching my breath, I heard it, faint, distant, carried on the wind. Footsteps, slow and heavy, pacing the street outside. It wasn't done with me. Ellen's couch was lumpy, the springs digging into my back, but I didn't care. It was better than my bed, better than feeling that weight sink down beside me. She'd gone quiet after I told her what happened, just nodded and pointed me to a blanket. Her living room smelled of cigarette smoke and stale coffee, a far cry from the sour around my house, and it felt like a lifeline. I sat there, journal in my lap, flashlight still gripped tight, listening to the wind howl outside. You sure you're okay? Ellen asked, leaning in the doorway, arms crossed. Her hair was loose now, gray strands framing her face, making her look softer than usual. No, I said, voice raw. It sat on my bed, Ellen. I felt the mattress move. And the door, too late. It's not just noises anymore. She sighed, rubbing her forehead. I believe you. Wish I didn't, but I do. That house, it's been wrong since Crane. I opened the journal, hands still shaky, and flipped to the last page. Asterisk, I'm sorry. Asterisk Amos's final words stared back, mocking me. He knew he'd screwed up. Whatever he let in, it's still there and it's pissed. Ellen sat across from me in an old armchair, lighting a cigarette. You think it's him? Crane's ghost or something. No, He was scared of it. Said it was angry, not what he wanted. I think he called something else. Something bigger. I tapped the page with the ice sketch. This keeps coming up. ITCs. He drew it, scratched it in the basement. It's like it's playing with me now. She exhaled smoke, staring at the sketch. You're in over your head, Jamie. You should leave, motel, anywhere but there. I can't. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. It's not just a house. I heard footsteps out there after I ran. It's not staying put. Her eyes narrowed. You're saying it followed you? I don't know. Maybe. I rubbed my face, exhaustion hitting hard. I need to stop it. Amos started this. There's got to be a way to end it. Ellen didn't argue, just smoked in silence. Finally, she said, my gran used to talk about stuff like this. Not Crane, but old superstitions. Salt iron prayers. Said it kept bad things out. I tried salt. I muttered. It laughed at me. Kicked it around, wrote too late. She winced. Then your past folk tricks. What's the journal say? I flipped through it again, slower this time, hunting for anything useful. Amos wrote about wards early on. Salt lines, iron nails, symbols drawn in ash. He'd chanted too, words he didn't translate, just scribbled phonetically. Later, he mentioned a binding, blood and a name, spoken aloud, to tie it to the circle. But the last entries were all panic, no fixes. Asterisk, the wards fail. It's loose. Asterisk, he lost control. I said, closing it. The circle in the basement, that's where he did it. Maybe I can redo it, trap it again. With what? Blood and mumbo-jumbo. Ellen snorted. You're not a witch. I don't need to be. I just need it to work. I stood, pacing her small living room. I've got salt left, some nails from unpacking, if I can find the right words. You're nuts, she cut in. It sat on your bed. You think it's going to sit still for your arts and crafts. I stopped, staring at her. You got a better idea? I'm not running forever. She held my gaze, then sighed. Fine, but you're not going back tonight. Sleep here. Figure out tomorrow. I've got a spare room. I nodded, too tired to fight. She showed me upstairs, a cramped bedroom with a single bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking my house. I dropped the journal on the nightstand, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed, blanket pulled tight. Ellen's place was quiet, no creaks or whispers, and I let myself relax, just a little. Sleep hit fast, dragging me under. I dreamed of the cellar, dark, endless, the little door swinging open. Something moved inside, tall and bent, eyes glowing like embers. It didn't speak, just watched, and the air buzzed with that raspy hiss. I woke gasping, daylight gone, the room pitch black. The clock read 2:03 a.m. I sat up, heart racing, and grabbed the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, landing on the window. My house loomed across the yard, windows black, porch sagging. Then I saw it, a flicker quick and faint in my bedroom window, a shadow, tall and jagged, passing by like it was pacing. I blinked, and it was gone. The glass stared back. Empty. I swung the light around the room. Nothing, just Ellen's old furniture. But the air felt off, colder than it should have been. I slid out of bed, barefoot on the creaky floor, and cracked the door. The hall was dark. Ellen's snores drifting from her room. Normal, safe. Then I heard it, a thud, soft but deliberate, from downstairs. My grip tightened on the flashlight. Another thud, then a slow creak, like a footstep on the stairs. I froze, listening. Creak, 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 steady climbing. It wasn't Ellen. She was still snoring, loud and oblivious. I stepped into the hall. Beam aimed down the stairs. The shadows twisted, but nothing moved. The creak stopped, halfway up, and the air turned icy, my breath puffing white. I whispered, Ellen? No answer, just her snores and that heavy silence. The flashlight flickered, once, twice, and I smacked it, panic rising. It steadied, and I edged toward the stairs, light shaking my hand. The steps were empty, but the cold grew sharper, biting my skin. Then, for From the landing below, a rasp, low guttural, like the hiss of my dream. It rolled up the stairs, curling around me, and I swear it said my name. Jamie. I stumbled back, slamming the bedroom door, and shoved the dresser against it. The flashlight dropped, rolling under the bed, and I scrambled for it, pulse pounding. The beam caught the window again, and there it was. Outside now, a shadow pressed against the glass. Tall, bent, arms dangling, its head tilted like it was staring right at me. No face, just darkness, but I felt its eyes boring in. The glass creaked, a thin, high sound, like it might shatter. I grabbed the journal, clutching like a shield, and yelled, "Get out!" My voice cracked, but the shadow didn't move, just stood there, motionless, watching. The rasp came again, louder, vibrating through the room. "You see?" I lunged for the light switch, flooding the room with yellow glow. The shadow vanished, the window empty, the air warming slow. I sank to the floor, back against the dresser, shaking so hard the journal slipped from my hands. The house, Ellen's house, was silent again, but I didn't trust it. I stayed there till morning, flashlight on, eyes on the window. Dawn broke gray and slow, and Ellen found me like that, still propped up, face pale. "Christ, Jamie," she said, crouching beside me. "What happened?" "It was here," I whispered, pointing at the window. "Outside, talking." It said my name. She glanced at the glass, then back at me, worry creasing her face. "You didn't sleep, did you?" "Couldn't. It came up the stairs, Ellen. I heard it." She didn't argue, just helped me up and led me downstairs. Coffee brewed while I told her. Thuds, creaks, the shadow. That voice. She listened, smoking fast, ash piling on the table. "It's not just your place anymore," she said finally. "If it's here, we're both in it." "I'm sorry," I muttered, guilt twisting my gut. "I didn't mean to drag you." "Stop. I've lived next to that damn house 20 years. Should have warned you harder." She stubbed out her cigarette. "What now?" I picked up the journal. Hand steadier now. The circle, the binding. It's all I've got. If I can trap it, maybe it'll leave us alone. "You're going back?" Her voice sharpened. "Have to. It's not stopping. I can't outrun it." I met her eyes. "Will you help?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Not stepping foot in there, but I'll watch your back. Salt, nails, whatever you need." I forced a smile, weak but real. "Thanks." We spent the day planning, salt from her pantry, nails from my toolbox, a knife for the blood part one didn't want to think about. I reread Amos's chants, practicing the garbled words, hoping I'd get them right. Ellen watched, skeptical but steady, and by dusk I was ready, or as ready as I'd ever be. The house waited across the yard, dark and silent, like it knew I was coming. I gripped the journal, Ellen behind me with a flashlight, and stepped toward it. The air thickened, the sour smell hitting me hard, and I heard it, faint, distant, but clear. Footsteps, pacing inside, waiting for me to walk back in. The porch steps groaned under my feet, louder than I remembered, like the house was waking up. Ellen stayed at the edge of the yard, flashlight beam cutting through the dusk, her face tight with worry. I carried a bag, salt, nails, a knife, a stub of candle I'd found in her drawer, and the journal tucked under my arm. My heart thudded, but I kept moving. Running hadn't worked. Hiding hadn't worked. This was it, my shot to end it. The front door creaked open, the musty air rushing out to meet me. Inside, the living room was dim, shadows pooling in the corners despite Ellen's light shining through the windows. The sour smell was stronger, sharp enough to sting my nose, and the floorboards creaked even when I stood still, like something else was pacing with me. "Be quick!" Ellen called from outside, voice low but firm. "I'm watching." I nodded, though she couldn't see it, and headed for the basement. The kitchen felt colder, the pantry stench thick as I passed. I yanked the basement door open, the hinges screaming, and shone my flashlight down the stairs. The beam bounced off wet concrete, the little door in the wall glinting like it was waiting. I took a breath, steadied myself, and started down. The air hit me hard, damp, metallic, heavier than before. The circle was still there, scratched into floor, the dark stains spreading wider like they'd grown. Above the little door, ITC's loomed, the letters sharper now, edges jagged. I set the bag down, hands sweaty, and pulled out the journal, flipping to Amos's early notes. The binding ritual. Salt to mark the circle, nails to anchor it, blood to seal it, words to call it in. Simple, if you ignore the insanity of it. I poured the salt first, tracing the scratch lines, my hand shaking so bad half of it spilled. The grains glowed faintly under the flashlight, a thin white ring against the grime. Next, the nails, 5 of them rusty but solid. I hammered them in with a rock from the junk pile, one at each point of an imaginary star inside the circle. The concrete cracked under the blows, the sound echoing too loud, like the house was amplifying it. The candle came last. I stuck in the center, lighting it with a match from Ellen's stash. The flame sputtered, weak and yellow, but held. I stepped back, checking the setup. Salt, nails, fire, close enough to Amos's sketch. Now the hard part. I pulled the knife from the bag, a cheap steak knife with a chipped handle. My stomach twisted as I pressed the blade to my thumb, just enough to draw a bead of red. It stung, sharp and quick, and I squeezed, letting drops fall into circle. The blood hit the concrete, soaking in fast, and the candle flickered like something noticed. Okay, I muttered, wiping my hand on my jeans. Here goes. I opened the journal, reading the chant guttural, nonsense words Amos had scribbled. Asterisk Varesh, Kolta Moreth. Asterisk, my voice cracked, clumsy, but I kept going, repeating it louder. Asterisk Varesh, Kolta Moreth. Asterisk, the air buzzed, a low hum vibrating through the floor, and the candle flared, spitting sparks. I added the last part, the binding, asterisk by salt and iron, by blood and name, I call you and stay. Asterisk, the hum stopped. The basement went dead quiet, the candle steadying. I held my breath, waiting, nothing, no footsteps, no whispers. Maybe it worked. Maybe a laugh cut through the silence, low, raspy, rolling up from the little door. My flashlight dropped, clattering, and the beam spun wild, catching the walls. The laugh grew, echoing, bouncing off concrete until it was everywhere. The salt line shivered, grains skittering like bugs, and the nails popped free, one by one, pinging across the floor. The candle snuffed out, smoke curling up, and the air turned frigid, my breath fogging fast. Jamie! Ellen's voice, faint from upstairs, sharp with panic. Get out! I grabbed the flashlight, swinging it toward the stairs, but the beam caught something else, the little door, creaking open an inch. Darkness spilled out, thick and moving, like ink pooling across the floor. I stumbled back, heart slamming, and ran for the stairs. The laugh followed, louder, shaking the walls, and the steps buckled under me, with splintering. I hit the kitchen floor hard, scrambling up as Ellen's light flooded in. Move, she yelled, grabbing my arm, pulling me toward the front door. The house groaned a deep, guttural sound, and the floorboards rippled, cracking apart. We burst outside, tumbling onto the porch, and I spun back, flashlight aimed inside. The living room was alive, shadows twisting, stretching, crawling up the walls. The laugh faded, replaced by footsteps, heavy and fast, stomping toward us. Ellen yanked me off the porch, and we ran to her yard, her flashlight shaking in her grip. The front door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the windows, and the house went still, dark, like it had never moved. I dropped to my knees, gasping, the journal still clutched tight. Ellen stood beside me, breathing hard, her light on the house. What the hell was that? She snapped. It didn't work, I said, voice trembling. The circle, it broke it, laughed at me. She swore under her breath, kicking the grass. You're done, Jamie. No more playing exorcist. I had to try. I stood, legs wobbly, and checked the journal, smudged but intact. It's stronger than I thought. No kidding. She glared at the house, then at me. You're staying with me tonight. No arguments. I didn't fight it. We went back to her place, locking the door, and I collapsed on the couch, flashlight beside me. Ellen brewed coffee, hands unsteady, and we sat in silence, the weight of it sinking in. The house wasn't just haunted. It was a cage, and I'd rattled the bars. Sleep wouldn't come, even with the lights on. I kept hearing that laugh, replaying the door cracking open, the shadows moving. Around midnight, Ellen dozed off in her chair, snores cutting the quiet, but I stayed awake, journal open. Amos's words mocked me. Ward's bindings, all useless. I'd fed it, maybe made it mad. Then I heard it, soft at first, a tap on Ellen's window. I looked up, slow, dreading it. The glass was dark, reflecting the room, but something shifted outside, a flicker, tall and bent, passing by. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the flashlight, aiming it, but the beam hit nothing, just empty yard and my house beyond. The tapping came again, faster, on the front door now. Tap, 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 like knuckles rapping deliberate. Ellen stirred, mumbling, but didn't wake. I crept to the window, peering out. The porch was empty, shadows still, but the tapping moved. Side window, back door, circling the house. My pulse raced, the flashlight shaking in my hand. Jamie, a whisper, faint, slithering through the walls. Not outside, inside, close like it was behind me. I spun, beam sweeping the room. Ellen slept, the coffee pot gleamed, but the air thickened, cold creeping up my legs. The whisper came again, Jamie, drawn out, mocking, from the ceiling now. I backed against the wall, light darting up. Nothing, just plaster, a faint crack. The tapping stopped, the whisper faded, but the cold stayed, wrapping tight. I slid down, hugging my knees, and waited, flashlight on, until dawn. Ellen woke at 6, blinking at me slumped there. It came here again, I said before she could ask. Tapped the window, said my name. Her face paled. Inside, yeah, it's not stuck over there anymore. She lit a cigarette, hands trembling. We're out of our depth. You need help. Someone who knows the stuff. Boo! Ghostbusters. I laughed, bitter and hollow. Priest, maybe, or someone who's dealt with worse. She exhaled smoke, staring at the ceiling. I'll ask around. You're not going back alone. I nodded, too drained to argue. The journal sat beside me, useless now, and the house loomed outside, silent but watching. It hadn't just broken the circle. It had toyed with me, followed me. Whatever Amos unleashed, it wasn't bound anymore. It was free, and it liked me too much to let go. Morning light didn't fix anything. Ellen's living room felt smaller. The air staled despite the open window. I sat on the couch, journal in my lap, replaying last night. The tapping, the whisper, that laugh echoing in the basement. The house across the yard stared back, windows dark. But I swore they flickered, like eyes blinking slow. Ellen paced, cigarette burning fast, muttering about finding help. We can't keep this up, she said, stubbing it out in an overflowing ashtray. It's in my house now. We need someone who knows what they're doing. Like who? I asked, voice flat. I don't exactly have a Rolodex of exorcists. She stopped, hands on her hips. There's a guy, Father Daniel. Priest retired now, lives a few miles out. My gran used to say he handled weird stuff back in the day. Blessings, cleansings, whatever you call it. Might know something. A priest? I raised an eyebrow. You think this is demons? I don't know what it is, Jamie, but it's not a leaky pipe, and I'm out of ideas. She grabbed her phone. I'll call him. You stay put. I didn't argue. She stepped into the kitchen, voice low as she talked, and I flipped through the journal again, hunting for anything I'd missed. Amos's chants were gibberish, his sketches frantic, circles, eyes, jagged lines. One page caught my eye, tucked near the back, half torn, asterisk, the name holds it. I spoke it once, and it came, I cannot unspeak it. Asterisk, no name listed. Just that. I frowned, tracing the words. If he called it by name, maybe that was a key. Say it again, send it back. Ellen came back, phone in hand. He'll meet us. Noon at the diner. Says he's heard Crane, Doesn't sound surprised. Really? I sat up straighter. What did he say? Not much. Just bring the book. Sounded old gruff. We'll see. She glanced out the window at the house. You up for this? Yeah. Beats sitting here waiting for it to knock again. We drove to the diner in her beat-up sedan. The journal on my lap, silence thick between us. The town rolled by. Empty streets, faded signs, a place stuck in time. The diner was busier than yesterday. A handful of locals nursing coffee. But we grabbed a booth in the back. Doris waved, pouring us cups without asking, and I sipped mine, eyes on the door. He walked in at 12:03. Tall, stooped, maybe 70, with a gray beard and a worn coat. Father Daniel, I guess. He carried a leather satchel, heavy from the way it swung, and spotted us fast, sliding into the booth across from me. His eyes were sharp blue, cutting through the diner haze. You're the one with the house, he said, voice rough like gravel. No hello, no small talk. Yeah, Jamie. I pushed the journal toward him. This was Amos Crane's. Found it in the attic. He took it, flipping it open with scarred hands, scanning pages fast. Ellen watched, tense, while I waited, coffee cooling. He stopped at the eye sketch, tapping it. This is trouble. You've seen it. I nodded. Shadow, tall, bent, moves fast. Last night it sat on my bed, followed me to her place. Daniel grunted, turning more pages. Crane was a fool. Thought he could play with things he didn't understand. This, he jabbed the sketch, is no ghost. It's older, hungrier. What is it? Ellen asked, leaning in. He hesitated, closing the journal. Hard to say without the name. Could be a spirit, a watcher, something worse. Crane's note suggests he tapped a threshold. Thin spots between here and elsewhere. Used blood, words, open a door. Didn't know how to shut it. Can we? I asked. Shut it, I mean. Maybe. He pulled a notebook from his satchel, scribbling something. Salt and iron won't hold it. Not this far gone. You tried that? Yeah, in the basement. It laughed, broke everything. He nodded, like he'd expected it. It's loose now, unbound. Crane's circle was a leash. He cut it, let it roam. We need the name he used, and a stronger ritual. Blood alone won't do. The name? I pointed at the torn page. He mentions it here. Says he spoke it, can't take it back. Didn't write it down. Daniel frowned, reading it. Sloppy bastard. Probably in his head, or another book he burned. Without it, we're guessing. He leaned back, eyes on me. Tell me everything, start to finish. I did, moving in the footsteps, cold spots, whispers, the shadow, the scratches. Ellen chimed in about last night, the tapping, my name the walls. Daniel listened, jotting notes, face unreadable. When I finished, he sat quiet, staring at the table. It's tied to you now, he said finally. You poked it, read the book, tried the circle. It likes that. Attention. Won't let go easy. So, what do we do? Ellen asked, voice sharp. Find the name or force it out. I've got books at home. Old texts, grimoires. Might match crane symbols. Give us a lead. Tonight, we go back, set a trap. Draw it in, make it show itself. Tonight, I swallowed hard. It's already mad. Better now than later, he said, firm. It's growing. Following you here means it's not housebound. Wait too long, it'll spread. Ellen swore under her breath. I'm not thrilled about this. You don't have to come, Daniel said, glancing at her. But I need him. He's the bait. Bait? I laughed shaky. Great. He didn't smile. You're in it, son. No out but through. We left the diner. Daniel leading us to his truck. An old Ford, rusted but running. He drove us to his place, a cabin off a dirt road, surrounded by pines. Inside, it smelled of wood smoke and mildew. Shelves packed with books, some leather-bound, some falling apart. He handed me a stack, yellowed pages, Latin titles, sketches of circles and eyes, and we spent hours digging. One book had a symbol like cranes, a jagged star, an eye in the center. Text called it a watcher, a thing that lingered at thresholds, feeding on fear, growing with notice. No name, just warnings. Asterisk, speak not its call, lest it bind to thee. Asterisk, too late for that. Daniel traced the star, muttering about blood and banishment, piecing a ritual together. By dusk, we had a plan. Salt and ash for a new circle. Iron spikes from a shed, my blood again, and a chant he tweaked from the grimoire. Not a binding, he said. A push. Force it back through the door. If it works, it's gone. If not, he didn't finish. We drove back to Ellen's, her face grim as she loaded salt and a flashlight. I'm not going in, she said, but I'll watch the yard. Yell if it goes bad. Deal, I said, forcing a grin. The house waited, darker now, the air thick with that sour rot. Daniel carried a satchel, spikes clinking, and I gripped the journal, stomach in knots. Inside, the living room was colder, the floorboards groaning loud. We headed to the basement, Daniel leading, his flashlight steady. The circle was a mess. Salt scattered, nails bent, candle melted into a puddle. The little door hung open wider, blackness spilling out, and the laugh started again, soft, raspy, curling around us. Say it fast. Daniel snapped, pouring ash over the salt, tracing a thicker ring. I hammered spikes in, hands slick, while he lit a new candle, muttering Latin under his breath. The laugh grew, the air buzzing, and the shadows twisted, stretching up the walls. I cut my thumb again, blood dripping into the circle, and Daniel handed me the chant, scribbled words, harsh and sharp. Asterisk, XIV'd, a buyer. Asterisk, I repeated it, voice shaking, as he joined in louder, firmer. The candle flared, the buzz turned to a roar, and the little door slammed shut, then flew open, wind rushing out. The shadow came, tall, bent, rippling black, filling the basement. It loomed over the circle, arms dangling, head cocked, and the laugh boomed, shaking the stairs. Jimmy! It hissed, voice like nails on glass, and the spikes trembled, ash scattering. Keep going! Daniel yelled, grabbing my arm. We chanted faster, asterisk, EXIV'd a buyer, asterisk, and I threw more blood, splattering the concrete. The shadow lunged, hitting the circle's edge, and the air cracked, a pulse knocking me back. The candle snuffed out, the laugh cut off, and the shadow shrank, sucked toward the little door like smoke down a drain. Then silence, heavy, absolute. The door hung still, cracked open an inch, but the blackness was gone. Daniel shone his light, breathing hard. Did it work? I asked, voice hoarse. Maybe, he said, wary. It's weaker, felt it pull, but without the name, it's not done. We climbed upstairs, legs shaky, and Ellen met us outside, flashlight trembling. Heard it screaming, she said. You okay? For now, I muttered, glancing back. The house was quiet, but I felt it, watching, waiting, not gone. We stumbled back to Ellen's, the night air biting at my skin, the journal clutched tight. The house loomed behind us, silent now, but it didn't feel like a win. Daniel's truck rumbled in the yard, and Ellen's flashlight shook as she swept it over the windows. Empty, dark, no flicker of shadows. Inside her place, the warmth hit me like a wall, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. Coffee, Ellen said, more order than offer. Heading to the kitchen, Daniel sank into the armchair, satchel at his feet, while I dropped onto the couch, the journal thudding beside me. My thumb stung, blood crusted from the cut, and my head buzzed with that last moment. The shadow shrinking, sucked toward the little door, but not gone. Did we hurt it? I asked, voice rough. Or just piss it off more? Daniel rubbed his beard, eyes on the floor. Hurt it, I think. Pulled it back some. Felt the threshold snap. But without the name, it's like locking a door with no key. It'll push again. Ellen came back with mugs, shoving one into my hands. You're saying it's not over? Not yet. He took his coffee, sipping slow. Weaker, maybe, but still there. Crane's door's wide open, been that way decades. Takes more than blood and words to slam it shut. I stared into my mug, steam curling up. So what now? We wait for it to come back. No, Daniel set his cup down firm. We find the name. It's the anchor Crane spoke it, tied it here. If we say it right, with the right push, we can banish it for good. Where do we look? Ellen asked, lighting a cigarette. Journal's a dead end. He didn't write it. Maybe not there, Daniel said, pulling his notebook from the satchel. But he got it somewhere, those books he bought, the ones and papers. If we find what he read, we might trace it. I nodded, slow. Library said he got text from an estate sale, 1923. Boston collector. No titles, though. Grimoires, Daniel muttered, scribbling. Occult stuff, rare, specific. I've got contacts, old priest collectors. Might know what Crane had. Takes time, though. Time's what we don't have. Ellen snapped, smoke trailing from her nose. It was in my house last night, tapping, whispering. What's next, sitting on my bed? Daniel met her glare, calm but hard. It's tied to him. He nodded at me. Not you? He's the one poking it. Stay out of that house. It might leave you alone. Might. She snorted. Great. I'm not going back, I said, cutting in. Not tonight. But if it's after me, I can't hide forever. You won't, Daniel said. Tomorrow, I'll call around, dig up those books. You too rest. Keep saw on the windows, iron by the doors. It's quiet now, might stay that way a bit. Quiet. I echoed bitter. Sure. Ellen sighed, stubbing out her cigarette. Fine. You're on the couch again, Jamie. I'm not sleeping with one eye open alone. Daniel left after finishing his coffee, promising to check in by morning. His truck growled down the road, and Ellen locked the door, dragging a chair against it. She grabbed a box of salt from the kitchen, sprinkling it along the windowsills, muttering about feeling stupid. I found a fireplace poker, iron close enough, and set it by the couch. Small defenses, but they beat nothing. The house across the yard stayed dark as I settled in, blanket pulled tight. Ellen went upstairs, her footsteps fading, and I lay there, flashlight on the floor, journal beside me. The quiet was thick, no creaks, no taps, just the wind outside, rattling branches. I wanted to believe we'd won something, pushed it back, but Daniel's word stuck. Weaker, not gone. Sleep crept up slow, my body crashing despite the buzz in my head. I dreamed of the basement. Concrete slick, the little door wide open, shadows spilling out like tar. That laugh echoed, low and wet, and the air humbled my name, over and over. Jimmy! I woke, gasping, the room dark, flashlight off. The clock glowed 3:17 a.m. I sat up, fumbling for the light. It clicked on, beam steady, and I swept it around. Ellen's living room, normal, still. The salt lines gleamed on the sills. The poker glinted by my feet. No taps, no whispers. I exhaled, shaky, and leaned back, keeping the light on my lap. Then I heard it, faint, distant, a creak from outside. Not Ellen's house, the yard. I edged to the window, pulling the curtain an inch. My house loomed, black against the night, and the porch creaked again, slow and deliberate, like someone pacing. I aimed the flashlight, beam slicing through glass, and caught it, a flicker, tall and bent, gliding past the front door. My breath hitched. It stopped mid-step and turned, head cocked, no face, just shadow, staring back. The beam shook in my hand, but I held it locked on that shape. It didn't move, didn't laugh, just stood there, watching. The air in the room cooled, not frigid, just enough to prickle my skin. Ellen, I hissed, loud enough to wake her, but not break the stare down. Footsteps thumped upstairs, and she stumbled down, bleary-eyed, hair wild. What? She snapped, then saw my face the light. She peered out, swearing under her breath. Is that it? Yeah, I whispered, just standing there. She grabbed her phone, dialing fast. Daniel, I guessed. The shadow tilted its head, slow, like it heard her voice, and the porch creaked again as it stepped closer, arms dangling. Ellen muttered into the phone. It's here, outside his place, looking at us. Get over here. The line crackled, Daniel's voice gruff, saying he'd come. The shadow didn't flinch, just loomed, edges rippling. I felt it, those unseen eyes, heavy, digging in. The salt on the sill shivered. a few grains spilling, and the poker twitched, scraping an inch across the floor. "It knows we're watching," I said, voice tight. "It's testing us." Ellen hung up, gripping her flashlight. "Stay put. He's 10 minutes out." 10 minutes stretched like hours. The shadow paced now. Slow laps across the porch, each creak louder, sharper. The air thickened, a faint sour tang seeping to the window, and the whisper started, soft, layered, my name woven in. Jim, it came from everywhere, walls, ceiling, outside, blurring into a hum. I backed from the window, flashlight trembling. Ellen grabbed the poker, holding it like a bat, her knuckles white. The whispers grew. The shadow stopped, and the front door, Ellen's door, rattled, a single hard shake. The chair jumped, salt scattering, and I yelled, "Stay out." The rattle stopped. The whispers cut off, sharp, and the shadow flickered, gone from the porch, no trace. The air eased, warming slow, but my pulse didn't slow. Ellen lowered the poker, breathing hard. What the hell was that? "Showing off," I said, wiping sweat from my face. "It's not weak, it's playing." Headlights swept the yard, Daniel's truck, pulling in fast. He burst in, satchel swinging, eyes darting. "Where is it?" "Was on the porch," Ellen said, pointing. "Rattled my door, then vanished." He checked the window, the salt, the poker. "It's flexing," pushing what's left. "Didn't come in, though." Good. I snapped. "It's still here." "Means we got time," he said, calm but firm. "I called a guy, old friend, knows grimoires. Thinks Crane's books came from a set tied to watchers, entities that latch on, feed on notice. Might have the name. When?" Ellen asked. "Tomorrow if he finds it. Till then, stay here. Keep the lines up. It's rattled, not gone." I nodded, sinking back onto the couch. Daniel stayed, settling in the armchair, and Ellen went upstairs, muttering about needing sleep. The house across the yard stayed dark. No creaks, no shadows. Dawn came slow, gray and heavy, and I didn't close my eyes, flashlight on, waiting for the next move. It wasn't over. It was resting, regrouping, and I knew, deep gut level knew, it had come back stronger. The name was our last shot, and I prayed Daniel's friend found it fast. Morning dragged in, sluggish and gray, the kind of light that made everything feel heavier. Ellen's living room was a mess. Salt dusted the floor. The poker lay crooked by the couch, and coffee mugs piled up on the table. I hadn't slept, eyes burning, the flashlight still warm in my hand. Daniel sat in the armchair, scribbling in his notebook, while Ellen paced, cigarette smoke curling around her like a shield. "It's too quiet," she said, flicking ash into a saucer. "After last night, it should have done something by now." "It's waiting," Daniel muttered, not looking up, wore itself thin, pushing at us. "Needs to recharge." "Recharge." I snorted, voice rough. "What, like a battery?" "Something like that." He tapped his pen on the page. "Feeds on fear, attention. We gave it plenty, now it's digesting." I rubbed my face, the journal beside me a dead weight. "Great, so we're dinner." Ellen shot me a look, half irritated, half worried. "Knock it off. He's got a lead, right?" Daniel nodded, flipping his phone open, an old flip model, scratched to hell. Friend called at dawn. Found a match. Crane's books traced to a grimoire, Liber Vigilans. Latin, 17th century, full of watcher lore. Lists names, rituals, banishments. He's emailing a scan. When? I asked, sitting up straighter. "Any minute. Signal spotty out here." He glanced at the window, at the house across the yard. "If it's got the name, we move tonight. Finish it." "Tonight?" Ellen stopped pacing. "After that show on my porch?" "Has to be," Daniel said, firm. "It's loose, not bound. Every day it gets stronger. We hit it now while it's licking wounds." I nodded, slow, dread pooling in my gut. The shadow pacing, the whispers, that laugh. It wasn't playing anymore. It was stalking, and I was the prey. "What do we need?" Same setup, circles, spikes, blood. But with the name, we don't bind, we banish. Push it back through the door, lock it. He tapped the notebook. Grimoire'll have the words. You'll say me. My stomach flipped. Why me? It's latched to you. Knows your voice, your fear. I'll guide, but you're the hook. Ellen swore, lighting another cigarette. You're sure this'll work? Sure as I can be, Daniel said, shrugging. Done it before. Smaller things, spirits mostly. This is bigger, but the rules hold. His phone buzzed, a sharp rattle on the table. He flipped it open, squinting at the screen, then grabbed a satchel, pulling out a battered laptop. Here we go. We crowded around as it booted, slow and wheezing. The email loaded, a grainy PDF, pages scanned from a book with cracked leather edges. Latin text filled the screen, dense and spiky, with sketches of eyes and circles. Daniel scrolled, muttering, until he stopped on a page titled Asterisk de Vigilantibus. Asterisk. Here, he said, pointing. Watchers. Entities of the threshold. Feed on notice. Grow with fear. Names listed. Crane symbols match this one. He tapped a word, bold and jagged. Asterisk Karathesh. Asterisk. Karathesh. I repeated, the syllables clumsy on my tongue. They felt heavy, like stones dropping into still water. That's it, Daniel said. Crane called it. Probably mangled the pronunciation. Let it in. We say it right with the banishment. It's gone. The page had a chant. Latin, short and sharp. Asterisk Karathesh. XT voco. A buyer in tenebras. Porta Claude. Asterisk Daniel translated, slow. Karathesh. I call you out. Depart into darkness. Close the door. Simple, I said, forcing a grin. If I don't choke on it. You won't, he said, no humor in his eyes. Practice it. We go at dusk, lights fading, it'll stir. Ellen gathered supplies. More salt, nails from her shed, a fresh candle. I sat with a chant, muttering under my breath, the name sticking like tar. Karathesh, XT voco. Each time, the air felt thicker, like it was listening. Daniel watched, nodding, while Ellen chain-smoked, nerves fraying. By dusk, we were ready. The sky bruised purple, the house across the yard a black silhouette. Daniel carried a satchel, spikes clinking, and I held a journal, the knife in my pocket. Ellen followed, flashlight in hand, stopping at the porch. I'm out here, she said, voice tight. Yell if it goes south. Will do, I said, stepping inside. The air hit me, sour, cold, heavier than last night. The floorboards groaned loud and slow, and the shadows twitched like they knew we were back. Basement, Daniel said, leading the way. The stairs creaked, the little door glinting below, cracked wider now. The circle was erect, salt gone, spikes scattered, but the scratches remained. Asterisk, ITCs. Asterisk, my stomach twisted. Daniel poured salt and ash, thicker this time, tracing a new ring. I hammered spikes, hands steadier now, adrenaline kicking in. He lit the candle, flame flickering wild, and nodded at me. Blood, then the words, loud, clear. I cut my thumb, deeper this time, blood welling fast, and let it drip into the circle. The concrete drank it, the candle flaring, and I started. Asterisk Karathesh. XT voco. A buyer in tenebras. Porta Claude. Asterisk, my voice shook, but I pushed, repeating it louder. Asterisk Karathesh. XT voco. A buyer in tenebras. Porta Claude. Asterisk. The air roared, a wind rushing up from the little door, slamming it wide. The laugh erupted, deep, wet, shaking the walls, and the shadows surged, filling the basement. Tall, bent, arms dangling. It loomed over the circle, edges rippling like oil. Jimmy, it hissed, voice splitting the air, and the spikes trembled, salt scattering. Keep going, Daniel yelled, grabbing my shoulder. I shouted the chant. Asterisk Karathesh. XT voco. A buyer in tenebras. Porta Claude. Asterisk. Voice raw. Blood dripping faster. The shadow lunged, hitting the circle's edge, and the air cracked, a pulse knocking us back. The candle snuffed out. The laugh turned to a scream, high, jagged, and human. and the shadow twisted, shrinking toward the door. But it fought. The spikes bent, snapping free, and the wind reversed, pulling at us. I stumbled, chanting louder, Aster's Caritish, XT Voco, a buyer in Tenebras, Porta Claude. Asterisk, and Daniel joined, his voice booming. The shadow clawed the concrete, leaving gashes, and the little door rattled, hinges screaming. More blood, Daniel shouted, shoving me forward. I slashed my palm, wincing, and flung it into the circle. The shadow shrieked, a sound like glass shattering, and the wind sucked inward, dragging it back. It thrashed, arms flailing, then collapsed, a black thread yanked through the door. The frame slammed shut, the roar cut off, and silence crashed in, thick, suffocating. I fell to my knees, panting, blood pooling under my hand. Daniel shone his flashlight, the beam steady. The circle was trashed, spikes gone, salt and ash smeared, but the door stayed shut, no crack, no shadow. Is it gone? I gasped, voice hoarse. Daniel crouched, checking the door, the circle. Felt it go through the threshold. Doors closed. For now. I stared at him, chest heaving. Name's power, he said grim. We used it, sent it back. But Crane's ritual, years open, might have weakened the seal. Could hold, could crack. Ellen's voice cut through, faint from upstairs. Jamie, you okay? Yeah. I yelled back, standing shaky. We climbed out, legs like jelly, and met her on the porch. Her flashlight shook, eyes wide. Heard screaming. Thought you're dead. Almost. I muttered, holding up my bloody hand. Think it's gone. Think. She glared at Daniel. Best we could do, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Needs watching. If it's quiet, we're good. We went back to Ellen's, locking the door, and I cleaned my hand, wincing at the sting. The house stayed dark. No creaks, no whispers. I crashed on the couch, too wired to sleep, flashlight close. Daniel sat up, notebook out, and Ellen smoked, staring at the ceiling. Midnight passed, then 1, 2. No taps, no shadows. Dawn came, pale and cold, and the house across the yard looked normal. Tired, old, but not alive. I wanted to believe it was over, but Daniel for now stuck, a splinter in my mind. The morning after felt wrong, too still, too normal. Ellen's living room buzzed with sunlight, dust motes floating lazy in the beams, but my skin crawled like something was off. I sat on the couch, bandaged hand throbbing, the journal open on my lap. Daniel slouched in the armchair, sipping coffee Ellen had brewed, his satchel packed but still close. She leaned against the kitchen doorway, cigarette unlit, watching me like I might crack. You look like hell, she said, finally lighting up. Sleep at all? Barely, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. The flashlight lay beside me, cold now, a habit I couldn't shake. Kept waiting for it to knock. Didn't. Daniel said, voice gruff but steady. House is quiet. Threshold shut. You'd feel it if it wasn't. Feel it. I glanced at him, skeptical. Like, what? He shrugged, setting the mug down. Pressure, cold, that itch you can't scratch. It's gone for now, trust me. For now. I echoed, bitter. You keep saying that. Because it's true. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. Crane's door was open decades. We can avail. We slammed it, but it's not steel. Could hold years, could crack tomorrow. Watch it, that's all. Ellen exhaled smoke, sharp and quick. Watch it? I'm not living next to that thing waiting for round 2. Then move, Daniel said, blunt. Or don't. Up to you. She glared, but I cut in before it escalated. I'll check it. Today. See if it's really gone. Alone. Ellen's voice rose. After last night, I'll go with him, Daniel said. Standing. Quick sweep. Basement rooms. If it's clear, you're good. If not, we'll know. I nodded, stomach twisting but resolved. Hiding at Ellen's wouldn't answer anything. I needed to face it. Feel the house. Prove it was just wood and dust again. Let's do it. We grabbed our stuff, journal, flashlight, Daniel's satchel, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the yard quiet, no wind to stir the trees. The house loomed ahead, paint peeling, windows blank. It looked tired, ordinary, but my pulse quickened as we climbed the porch. Ellen stayed back, flashlight in hand, watching from her steps. The front door creaked open, slower than before, the sound hollow. Inside, the living room was unchanged, my boxes, the lamp, dust thick on the floor. No cold spots, no sour smell, just stale air. I flicked the light switch. The bulb buzzed on, steady. Daniel swept his flashlight around, nodding. "Feels dead," he said, moving to the kitchen. I followed, the floorboards creaking soft, normal. The pantry was musty, but the sharp rot was gone. The basement door stood ajar, no wind, no hum. I hesitated, then pulled it wide, shining my light down. The stairs looked the same, warped, worn, but the air didn't bite. We descended. Daniel first, his beam on the little door. It was shut tight, no crack, no shadow leaking out. The circle was a mess, salt and ash smeared, spikes gone, bloodstains faded into the concrete. Above the door, ITC stared back, but the letters felt flat, old, like graffiti from a kid's dare. "Quiet," Daniel muttered, crouching by the circle. He pressed a hand to the floor, eyes half closed, then nodded, nothing pushing back. Thresholds holding. I exhaled, tension easing a fraction. "So it's really gone?" "For now," he said again, standing. "Keep an eye out. Cold, noises, anything odd. Call me if it shifts." We checked upstairs, my bedroom, the spare room. The attic door still locked from when I jammed it shut. The scratches on my door, asterisk, you see, too late asterisk, were still there, raw and deep, but the room felt warm, empty. No whispers, no weight. I ran a finger over the words, rough under my skin, a reminder I couldn't erase. Back outside, Ellen met us, arms crossed. "Well, clear," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a house again." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Good. You're still staying with me tonight. Don't argue." "Wasn't gonna," I said, grateful. Daniel clapped my shoulder, promising to call his friend found more, and drove off, his truck rattling down the road. Ellen and I went inside, the day stretching ahead, mundane but fragile. I spent it unpacking at her place, clothes, books, stuff I'd left in the car. The house stayed quiet across the yard, no creaks, no flickers. By afternoon, I felt almost normal, helping Ellen fix a leaky faucet. The journal tucked away on a shelf. Work loomed tomorrow. Back to the office. A routine I could cling to. Maybe this was it. A fresh start after all. Dusk came soft, the sky bleeding orange. Ellen cooked pasta, simple, and we ate at her table, radio humming low. The house outside faded into shadow, but I didn't look. Didn't want to jinx it. "You think it's really over?" she asked, twirling spaghetti on her fork. "Hope so," I said, sipping water. Daniel seemed sure. "Mostly." She snorted. "Mostly's not enough of that thing." "Yeah." I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. "I'll keep the flashlight close." Night settled, and I took the couch again, blanket heavy, flashlight on the floor. Ellen went upstairs, her snores drifting down, and I lay there, staring at the ceiling. The quiet was too perfect. No wind, no creaks, just my breathing. I wanted to trust it, but Daniel, for now, gnawed at me, a splinter I couldn't pull. Sleep crept up, slow and shallow. I dreamed of the basement, dark, still, the little door shut but trembling, like something pressed against it. No laugh, no shadow, just that faint shake, steady as a heartbeat. I woke, slow, the room dark, flashlight off. The clock glowed 2:49 a.m. I sat up, rubbing my neck, and clicked the light on. The beam swept the room, salt lines intact, poker still by the couch. Normal. I exhaled, leaning back, but then I heard it. Soft, almost nothing, a creak from outside. My house, not Ellen's. I edged to the window, pulling the curtain a sliver. The porch was empty, the windows black, but the creak came again, slow, deliberate, from inside. I aimed the flashlight, beam cutting through the glass, and caught a flicker, brief, faint, a shadow passing the living room window. My chest tightened. It stopped mid-frame and turned head cocked, staring back. "Ellen!" I hissed, loud but low, keeping the light on it. She thumped downstairs, groggy, grabbing the poker as she saw my face. "What?" she whispered, peering out. The shadow didn't move, just stood, tall and bent, edges soft now, less solid. "It's back," I said, voice shaking. "Or it never left." She swore, dialing Daniel fast. The shadow tilted its head, slow, like it heard, and the creak shifted. Upstairs now, my bedroom. The beam shook in my hand, but I held it, locked on that shape. It flickered, fading, then gone, the window empty again. Daniel picked up, voice rough with sleep. "What's wrong?" "Shadow," Ellen snapped. "In his house, watching us. Thought you said it was gone." "Should be," he said, alert now. "I'm coming, stay put." He hung up, and we waited, me by the window. Ellen with a poker, the air cooling slow. No whispers, no laugh, just that creak, faint pacing, like it was settling back in. Daniel's truck roared up 20 minutes later, and he burst in, satchel swinging, flashlight blazing. "Show me," he said, and I pointed, recounting it. Creak, shadow, the stair. He checked the yard, then my house, quick and careful, returning grim-faced. The decision hit me like a punch. Sharp, final, no room for second guesses. Ellen was right. We had to get out. The house wasn't just wood and peeling paint anymore. It was a trap, a box holding something that wouldn't let go. Daniel's residue. Excuse didn't cut it. Not after that shadow stared me down. Not with the creaks pacing my floors. I wasn't waiting to see if it'd fade or grow teeth again. Morning light spilled across Ellen's yard, pale and cold, as we hashed it out over coffee. My hand ached, the bandage stiff with dried blood, and the journal sat on the table, a brick I couldn't toss. Daniel sipped his mug, quiet, while Ellen smoked, ash piling up fast. "I'm done," I said, voice flat but firm. "I'll pack today, crash somewhere else, motel, whatever. You should too." "Already on it," Ellen said, exhaling smoke. "Called a friend in town, got a spare room. I'm not sleeping next to that thing another night." Daniel set his cup down, slow, smart. Residue's not alive, but it's there. Echoes of Crane's mess. Might stay quiet, might stir. Distance is best. "You're not coming?" I asked, eyeing him. "Got my own place to watch," he said, shrugging. "I'll check in, make sure it doesn't spread. Call if you see anything." I nodded, but his calm grated on me. He'd seen it, fought it, and still talked like it was a leaky faucet. I grabbed the journal, shoving it into my jacket. "Let's move, then." Ellen drove us in my car, still parked by the house, and I started loading boxes, clothes, whatever I could grab fast. The front door creaked as I stepped in, the air stale but not sour, no cold spots nipping at me. It felt empty, almost normal. But I didn't trust it. I worked quick, hauling stuff to the trunk, eyes darting to the windows, the stairs. No shadows, no creaks, just dust and silence. Upstairs, my bedroom was a gut punch. The scratches, asterisk, you see. Too late, asterisk, glare from the door, raw and deep, like they'd been carved yesterday. I grabbed my mattress, sheets still tangled, and dragged it down, ignoring the way the floor groaned, softer now, but still there. The attic door stayed locked, the spare room bare. I didn't linger. Every second felt like bait. Ellen helped, carrying boxes, her flashlight tucked in her belt even in daylight. "Looks dead," she said, glancing around. "Maybe he's right, just echoes." "Maybe," I muttered, slamming the trunk. "Don't care. I'm out." We drove separate, heard her friends, me to a motel on the edge of Harrow's End. A cheap place with flickering neon and a gravel lot. I checked in room 6 and dumped my stuff on a sagging bed that smelled of bleach and old cigarettes. The walls were thin, the TV buzzed static, but it was miles from that house, and that was enough. I called work, quit over voicemail, no explanation. The job was a lifeline once, but now it tethered me to a town I couldn't stand. I'd figure money out later. Sell the car, take freelance, anything to keep moving. Ellen texted she'd settled in, safe, and I replied with thumbs up to drain for more. Night fell fast, the motel windows showing a black sky, no stars. I locked the door, wedged a chair on the knob, and kept the flashlight close, a habit I couldn't shake. The journal sat on a nightstand, unopened. I didn't want to read Amos's panic again, but I couldn't ditch it either. Sleep tugged at me, heavy and insistent, and I let it pull, crashing hard. I dreamed of the house, dark, endless, the little door in the basement pulsing like a heart. No shadow, no laugh, just that steady thump, 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 vibrating through the walls. I woke, slow, the room dim, flashlight off. The clock blinked 3:33 a.m., red and steady. I sat up, rubbing my face, and clicked the light on, sweeping it around. Motel walls, chipped paint, nothing. Then I heard it, faint, so soft I almost missed it, a creak outside the window. My breath caught. I edged the curtain, pulling an inch, and aimed the beam. The parking lot stretched empty, gravel glinting, my car alone under a buzzing streetlight. Another creak, closer from the walkway outside my door. I gripped the flashlight, heart thudding, and cracked the door, light slicing through. The walkway was bare, with planks, a rusted railing. No one. The creak stopped, the air cool but normal, no sour tang. I exhaled shaky and shut the door, locking it tight. Nothing. I muttered, willing it true, just the building. But the quiet didn't settle right. I sat on the bed, light on my lap, listening. Minutes ticked by, 5, 10, then a tap, soft and sharp, on the window. My head snapped up. Tap, 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 slow, deliberate, like a knuckle rapping glass. I swung the beam, curtain still drawn, and the sound shifted to the wall, then the door, circling the room. Stop it. I whispered, voice trembling. The taps paused, then came again, louder, faster, a rhythm that buzzed in my skull. I grabbed the phone, dialing Daniel, my hands slick with sweat. It rang twice, his gruff, yeah, cutting through. It's here, I said, low and urgent. Tapping, window, door, walls. Motel, not the house. Stay calm, he said, awake now. Salt, got any? No, just the flashlight, the journal. Use it. Open it, read the chant. Might push it off. I'm coming, where are you? Motel on Route 9, room 6. The taps grew, the staccato beat, and the air cooled, my breath puffing faint. Hurry! He hung up, and I snatched the journal, flipping to the banishment. Asterisk Caritish, XT Voco, a buyer in Tenebras, Port Claude. Asterisk I read it, voice cracking, loud as I could. Asterisk Caritish, XT Voco, a buyer in Tenebras, Port Claude. Asterisk the taps faltered, slowing, and I repeated it, shouting now, the words raw in my throat. The air warmed, the tapping stopped, and the room went still, too still. I held the flashlight, beam on the door, waiting. Headlights swept the lot. Daniel's truck, gravel crunching as he pulled in. He banged on the door, and I let him in, chair scraping aside. Saw it, he said, breathless, flashlight blazing. Shadow, faint on the walkway, faded when I got close. It followed me, I said, sinking onto the bed. Not residue, it's still here. He checked the window, the walls, then sat, face grim. Could be a thread. Cranes tied to it, stretched thin. Or it's stronger than I thought, clinging. What do? My voice broke. I can't keep running, it finds me. Leave, he said, sharp. Far, out of state, out of reach. Break the link, distance, time. I'll watch the house. Dig more. If it's tied to the land, it might fade. Might, I muttered, bitter. Always might. Best I've got, he said, meeting my eyes. Go now, pack drive. Don't stop till you're gone. I didn't argue. I threw my stuff into bags. Clothes, journal, flashlight. Hands shaking, adrenaline pumping. Daniel waited, scanning the lot. And I checked out. The clerk barely glancing up. My car roared to life, and I peeled out Daniel's truck shrinking in rear view. The road stretched dark, empty, and I drove past Harrow's End, past the county line. No plan, just away. Hours blurred, gas stations, headlights, radio static. Dawn broke, pale and thin, as I hit a new state, a nowhere town with a diner and a cheap motel. I stopped, exhausted, and checked in room 12 this time, locking the door tight. The bed creaked as I sat, flashlight on, journal unopened. The quiet was heavy, but no taps, no creaks, just my breathing, ragged and loud. I didn't sleep, just watched the window, the walls, waiting. Noon came, then dusk, and the motel stayed still. I texted Ellen, I'm out, safe, somewhere else. She replied fast, good, stay gone. I nodded at the screen, like she could see, and leaned back, eyes burning. Night fell, the room dark except my flashlight. I lay down, too tired to fight it, and drifted, shallow and tense. The dream came slow. The house, distant now. The little door shut but trembling, a faint creak leaking through. No shadow, no voice, just that sound. Soft, steady, following. I woke, sharp, the room black, flashlight dim. The clock read 4:01 a.m. I sat up, beam sweeping. No taps, no cold, just silence. But as I settled, ears straining, I heard it, faint, miles away, carried on the wind. A creak, slow and deliberate, like footsteps pacing a porch I'd left behind. I grabbed the flashlight, heart pounding, and stared at the door. It didn't move, didn't rattle, but the sound lingered, a whisper in the dark. The house was gone, miles back, but something, some thread, some echo, knew where I was, and it wasn't done.